Hi, happy Thursday evening. Thank you for joining our town hall this evening. Boy, we are on week 8 of these SMB series, and we've really enjoyed the opportunity to bring timely and relevant content. We're trying to select content that we hear as we survey and we talk to small business owners. We talk to those in and around Utah. And tonight we're going to talk about mental health. And this is one that this is the second conversation on this topic that we've had. There was just a really nice and positive reception the first time we did this. And we've got a new panel. We're gonna have a great conversation this evening. I'm really excited about those who have joined us. I'd like to do some quick introductions. First of all, moderating the panel this evening is Jody Hildebrand. Jody is the owner and clinician of Connections Classroom. She's been in private practice for 20 years. She's written over 20 workbooks and produced over 100 free podcasts that have been downloaded over 1.5 million times in 23 countries. We appreciate Jody moderating the panel this evening. Dallin Allred. Dallin is a successful local entrepreneur. Dallin co-founded Tava Health after experiencing the pain and frustration of trying to find a therapist for himself. Prior to founding Tava, Dallin co-founded Artemis Health, which helps large employers use data to optimize the health benefits they offer to employees and to their families. Ruby Franke. Ruby is mother to 6 children and is a creator of the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, which has attracted nearly 2.5 million subscribers and over 1 billion video views. Wow. She is the founder of the newly launched and failed clothing company, Ruby Doo Boutique. Ruby launched this. I had to confirm that was that I wasn't reading that inaccurately, and learned that Ruby launched a new brand week 1 of March, which turned out there was a lot going on, at least by week 3 of March. Ruby has learned the importance of vulnerability in creating healthy relationships with an audience and people around her. And lastly, Scott Beardno. Scott is a residential construction superintendent at Ivory Homes and also spends time at Cafe Rio with a background in the restaurant industry. Scott has a business degree from BYU and a culinary arts degree from UVU. After experiencing a tragedy in the family, Scott and his wife began their mental health journey, finding great strength in prioritizing emotional and mental wellness. As I said, what a great topic of conversation. This was certainly relevant before COVID, and I think it becomes more and more relevant as we think about some of the challenges that we deal with in thinking about the stresses of what's going on in society, in our businesses, in our companies, in our families. And I think this is a real opportunity to have a conversation that may have us all introspectively think about where we are in finding and maintaining mental health and feeling peace, regardless of what lives in front of us or around us. So, Jody, thank you again for moderating. Really excited for the conversation, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. So the purpose of the panel discussion today is to talk about managing mental health inside business. And more specifically, I want to start a conversation with our panelists talking about how to recognize control in our lives, in our homes, in our relationships, in our businesses, and how that lack of control can create anxiety in our lives. And then how we can learn strategies of how to learn to live in a state of connection/vulnerability in the midst of things that are completely out of control in our lives. So that's a really, it's a balance to strike. So I'd like to kick off the session with a question. COVID came out of nowhere. I think it took everybody by surprise. And I am curious about how COVID or any of the state or local government directives have affected your business. I'd like to start just by sharing mine. I, on March 11th, was in a thriving business and working with clients and feeling really joyful about my life and feeling really balanced and centered, and boom, COVID hit. And within 3 days, I started losing a handful of clients. And within a month, half of my clientele disappeared. And I had very mixed feelings. I was concerned about how am I going to take care of my family? And secondly, my clients, now more than ever, they needed support. And many of them, because they're losing jobs, the stresses of daycares and lack of money and just all the different stresses that are going on, they just are not able to get the support that they need. And so I am curious, I'd like to open that up to the panel. I'd like to start with you, Scott. How has COVID affected you in a business standpoint and any of the directives from state or local governments?
Thanks, Jody. So for me, I've been pretty blessed, honestly. My job is stable and it's continued throughout this pandemic. There have been a lot of changes as far as what the day-to-day looks like for me and how to manage, other people coming in as far as building homes, subcontractors and people looking at homes and managing social distancing. So there's been a lot of changes in what that looks like. But overall, I've been really lucky as far as maintaining my job, a normal work schedule, and not seeing too much downside from the pandemic personally.
Oh, that's wonderful. Very fortunate. I wonder if Ruby or Dallin, if you've experienced, especially in the form of feeling anxious. I really want to keep the conversation talking about feeling out of control, anxious, and how to move vulnerability into our lives. So Dallin, how about for you?
Yeah, so for me personally, so at Tava, we deliver therapy virtually, and we have for almost a year. And so when COVID hit, we felt a lot of additional urgency because we had more and more patients that were kind of desperate looking around for somebody that they could speak with or a therapist that they could meet with if they were working with somebody previously. Or I think what was more likely is that they had things that were already kind of, COVID brought other things to the surface and helped people look for professional therapeutic counsel when previously it hadn't been as high of a priority. Just increased and aggravated the amount of stress and anxiety they were feeling, and brought them to our doorstep. So we had a lot of work to do to make sure that we had the resources and the bandwidth to help as many people as we're visiting the website and we're signing up. Personally, I was also in the middle of trying to raise a round of venture capital. We kicked that process off in February. And so in early March, we kind of hit, some macroeconomic black swan events, I think is the venture capital term, where, all of a sudden, all of these in-person meetings that I had previously scheduled, I was planning on, being in San Francisco one day and then flying across the coast to a different city the next day, and all had to be moved online. And the macroeconomic climate and the stock market obviously changed, and that made investors much more conservative. And so for me, that created a lot of anxiety around, seems like we're having a hard time, making sure that this round's going to come together at the appropriate time. We need these resources more than ever to help people that are coming to our website. How do we make all of these kind of line up? And fortunately, we were able to close that round of venture capital. We just announced this a couple of weeks ago, and things are going well for us. But that was and continues to be kind of a personally challenging moment.
Mm-hmm. I can hear that. Sounds like you had a handful of days or weeks where you aren't quite sure which way it was going to go. A great opportunity to feel out of control and let the anxiety raise. Thank you for sharing that. Ruby, sounds like you launched a clothing business week 1 of March. How would you respond?
Yeah, with the hopes that Easter was around the corner, and so that's what I was really going for. And I totally see the out of control. I would, we launched, and it was like, okay, I wouldn't say it was like a ballpark hit, but it was okay. And I could see that there's some adjustments here that could be made. And then, like you said, March 11th, I think that's when the president announced and got on, and it was the 12th that everything just cut off. And so that's where the anxiety is like, I don't know what's going to happen the next day or the next day. And so I thought, well, what I can do is we can fly out to LA. So we bought tickets to go fly out to LA and to meet with some people for wholesale, make some adjustments to the store. And then those got canceled, and now we're not flying out there. And then I thought, okay, well, we can still make this work. So then we found, Kevin and I found somebody in LA who was interested in running the store for us. And we thought, that's it. So it's like this roller coaster. We're like, that's the answer. We're going to do it. He just needs, X amount of dollars a month. We could totally pull that off. And so there's this excitement. And then, and then we start to watch our AdSense dollars go down, and our main business, which is funding this clothing line, it's the cash flow. We're starting to see that dry up, and we're thinking we can't even keep our own paycheck that we're paying ourselves, let alone fund a second business at this point. So the out of control was that I kept thinking, oh, now I'm in control because I'm going to go to LA and figure this out. Oh, well, now I'm in control because we found someone to take over the business. Well, actually, now we're in control because we're just going to put it on hold. Oh, shoot. Now the whole thing's gone. So it's just like out of my hands.
Yeah. Well, Ruby, you give a very clear picture about living in a state of vulnerability. You went through all those experiences and you said, okay, now I'm in control. So now my anxiety can go away. But really what you were experiencing was you were just staying in the reality of the experience and trying to move through it, which is what I'd call vulnerability. And it is very difficult to strike being vulnerable and being out of control. Because as you all probably appreciate, life is completely unpredictable. And oftentimes we recognize how out of control we are, and then our anxiety spikes. And that's when we call for help. We need our support systems. We go to therapists, we go to friends, we go to family to get support. So thank you for giving such a vulnerable example of what it's like to be like living in reality, living in a state of vulnerability. So I am curious, are there any other places in your home life? Because everybody is working from home now. Many people have children around. I've sat on many meetings these days with kids screaming in the background. Any other stressors, things that you feel out of control around, you feel anxiety about, that are popping up in your life? Let's start with you, Down.
Honestly, I feel pretty lucky on this front. I've got two small kids, two daughters, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and an amazing wife who actually works full-time with me at Tava as our clinical director. And we were fortunate enough to have somebody who was able to come and watch our kids during the day, and is continuing to do that. So it hasn't disrupted my home life as a result of COVID. I think that was the question, right? Okay. Yeah, so COVID has not personally disrupted my home life all that much, besides the thing that I mentioned before, where we have a lot of extra people that we feel an obligation to really make sure that we're doing a good job for on the mental health and clinical side of things. So besides lots of long hours and late nights that are probably expected in an early stage company, I feel pretty lucky overall.
Well, again, very fortunate, very fortunate. I'm wondering how many people look at you and go, man, I wish I had his life. I'm happy for you. Scott, what's it been like for you?
So one thing for me is trying to get a handle on, initially, as I learned about the pandemic and as it came out, trying to figure out what information that I was getting was actually real, and what I needed to watch out for, because I didn't stay at home to work. I continued to work out in the field with both my jobs. And so the concern for me is, how do I keep myself safe while also making sure that I don't infect others, because I'm still interacting with all these people, social distancing aside, it still felt really vulnerable because I don't know how this is going to spread. I don't know what I need to do to keep myself safe. So I've taken precautions to make sure that I'm not infecting those that I live with, that I care about, that I'm going to be seeing when I come home. So that's felt pretty vulnerable and scary, and just something that I'm like, I have no control over this, other than just I can do what I can do, but I don't know exactly what I need to do. So it felt super vulnerable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I just want to reinforce for everybody who's listening is that these experiences in life that pop up, like you carry a glass jar out of the fridge to set on the counter and you miss the counter and it splashes all over the ground and glass is all over your feet. It's an out of control feeling. It's a very vulnerable experience. And there's things that go on constantly that we experience in life that we cannot control, that for many of us, we immediately go to feel nervous, feel worried, try to control it. And the invitation is to have good mental health is to recognize that I actually can't control this thing that's showing up. But what I can do is I can tell myself what the reality is, which is, yes, I was not paying attention when I went to set that on the counter and it fell, and I need to be careful about the glass on the ground and accept the quote unquote vulnerability of the experience. And what will happen is it will neutralize going into anxiety. Because what you're saying is, this is out of control. I'm going to do what I can to be responsible inside of the out of control experience. And then I'm going to surrender what I'm not able to manage. And that will create a very strong sense of connection inside yourself where anxiety will be almost impossible to flourish inside you. So I'm wondering for you, Ruby, how have you been managing these other relationships at home during this COVID experience?
Well, my heart broke the first time I started seeing it affect the kids. Like the first week was kind of almost a party. Like the kids were so excited, completely oblivious really to the reality of what was going on. And then by the third week, there were some tears. And my little 6-year-old, she was just sobbing. And I think for me, that's where I feel vulnerable is I want to fix her being crying, and I know I don't have that power to do it. And so I'm out of control because I can't control her. But she was crying and she's like, when are they going to let us go outside and just touch people? I just want to go out and touch everyone. All dramatic, So that's been, with the little girl. And then I don't know how many months we're into it now. Are we like two and a half? 2.5. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not 6, like I keep telling myself. Okay, got it. So yeah, 2.5 months in, and now, because we're having to cut our take-home pay, the reality is setting in for our older kids who are going to a private school that you may not be going to the same school you've been going to. And so how do I address this with my older teen kids who just have 1 year left in their school and now they have to, maybe switch schools? And so it's a lot of kind of sitting back and watching life and trying to figure out, I don't know, what I can say, and just, I don't know, giving my kids just a lot of, yeah, I get it. I totally see this is affecting you, and I would help it if I could, and I can't.
That's a really good example of being literally out of control and not knowing how to aid and comfort and nourish another human being, especially your children. I was talking on the phone the other day with somebody, and their little 3-year-old came up and she wanted to say hello to me because she's seen me before. And she's like, "Hi, Jody." And I called her by name and I said, "Have you been out playing in the park?" I don't know what I was thinking. Of course, she's not been out playing in the park. And she's like, "No, I can't go to the park because of COVID." And my heart just sank. Because I thought, here's this 3-year-old that doesn't even understand what she's saying. She said she can't go outside. And again, I felt this out of control feeling. I felt the vulnerability of the experience. I wanted to correct it and make her feel better, like control it, right? Because I felt that immediate anxiety. And my hunch is that many people who are watching this have had just probably many days, if not every day, where they feel a sense of out of control, which is producing this anxiety in their lives, and how to manage it. So on the heels of that, I am interested in my next question of how have the three of you been managing these experiences? If you could give us, one or two experiences where you've been out of control, you felt anxious, you've been willing to stay in the reality, which is the vulnerability of the experience you're having. And how have you been using, like what strategies have you been using as far as mental health and managing you, and then also offering it to dependents? Let's start with you, Dallin.
Yeah, happy to go first.
Thank you.
So for me, one of the things that has helped me feel a little bit more in control is to double down on the things that I truly feel like I can affect. And one of those is my own routine and schedule. I've found that personally, my level of anxiety diminishes if I'm, keeping a kind of a tight schedule, maybe getting up a little bit earlier than I would otherwise, making sure I have a nutritious breakfast so that I'm not eating something that it's going to make me feel bogged down and a little bit groggy later in the day. So that kind of just making sure I'm focusing on my own routine and rhythm is helpful. And then, raising young kids, that also seems to help them as well. They really seem to thrive when they have kind of a set bedtime and a set wake up time, and we're all kind of riffing and jamming together. The other thing that I feel like has really helped me is, taking the opportunity to share with, whether it's my wife, my partner, my family, people that I work with, the moments when I am feeling anxious or when I am feeling stressed. We have kind of weekly sessions where we talk about, the thing that is keeping us up at night, and it's a figure of speech, but sometimes that's a literal thing that's kind of tickling in the back of your brain. Just being able to be open and transparent about those types of challenges, I feel like personally really helped me feel like I'm more inclined to be able to take back that control and just be aware of the things that are causing that anxiety.
Beautiful responses. I love what you said at the end of, being open, I would just say emotionally honest about here's where my head is. Here's where my emotions have been today. And hopefully you have a partner or friends or family who can hold that and validate that, like acknowledge the reality of your experience. Thank you. Ruby, how about for you?
Well, I wish I could say I approached it healthy from day one. And the truth is, I got into distraction and started sourdough start. I don't know if you've ever started a sourdough start and then just let it take over your kitchen. Like we had sourdough coming out of every cake and cookie and batter. And so that was for about a week. And the kids were distracted in their puzzles. But what's been super helpful, actually, Jody, have been your podcasts. So since Kevin has been home, he's usually, he teaches up at the university. He's been home. And so the two of us have had a chance to connect like we haven't actually before. And I can see now how just this extra time has been a blessing. So we've been going on nightly walks. We don't listen to the podcast together, but we'll listen to them during the day. And then at night we'll go on a walk. And it's just being outside in the fresh air and connecting outside, holding hands as we walk has been more helpful than I ever would have thought. It's my favorite time of day. And the kids every once in a while, like, oh, we want to go on a walk with you too. And so we'll, some days we'll have little chicks waddling behind us, and sometimes they're zooming ahead on their bikes, and it's never planned, but always at least one or two of the kids will join us. And it's just been a good chance where it's free to say what you want. It's free to say, and there's no repercussions of whatever it is you're going to say.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. It sounds very similar to what Dallin just talked about. And when we're able to have those kind of relationships, it creates incredible amounts of safety, which calms us down, just calms our spirits down, so we don't feel afraid. Because anxiety gets us really unnerved, and we then try to start controlling everything. So I'm glad that you and your husband and your kids, sounds really spontaneous, that you guys can have those experiences. That's great. Scott, anything you want to add to this topic?
Sure, but first I want to validate Ruby and just say I love sourdough, and I have had that sourdough take over my kitchen as well. So that was exciting to hear that. But I love what's been said by Dallin and Ruby already, and just add my voice to how important it is to reach out and open up about whatever's going on for me. And I'm lucky enough to have a medium for that, with a lot of guys that I am close with, and I call them often. And so I have men around me, and women as well, that I trust, that I know will hear me and validate what's going on for me, and speak truth to me, and help me sift through all the jumbly thoughts that are in my mind to see what's really going on for me. And not just that, but to focus on the things that I actually have control over, which is not a whole lot. And help me get to a place where I can manage the world around me, while not stepping out of the bounds of trying to control the things that I can't control. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very clearly, very clearly. So all those jumbly thoughts, I call those jumbly thoughts distortion, things that I'm listening to that are not really the reality. Distortion tells me things like, you should control this, or you should be able to stop this, whatever it is. And the truth is that we can't. We have a question from the YouTube audience. How do you address the added layer of complexity of managing your personal mental health when faced with the social stigma related to how you choose to self-care? For example, in-person therapy, outdoors, etc. Hope that sit with you.
I could say something on that.
Please.
Where we are on social media every day, a lot of times live, going on those walks. The first time we went out on a walk, we were Insta-storying it, and I didn't think anything of it. And we got such a massive feedback of hate. It almost knocked me down. And I'm pretty used to it. I'm pretty used to getting shade, but it was pretty unnerving because it painted my motive to be something that it wasn't. And it was very innocent to go outside with my children and let them ride a bike around the neighborhood. And a lot of people didn't see it that way, and they thought I was being irresponsible. I was going to bring COVID to my neighborhood because I had been out of the country, 4 weeks before. And so what I try to do in that situation is just acknowledge that this person or these people or these comments are people who are also afraid, and they're people who are fearful and actually trying to just control what I do. And if I can recognize that they're in fear, I have a lot more compassion for the person who's writing the comment, and recognize that this is a perception they have and it's not true for me. And then I can usually let that go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is that when you can recognize that the person, when you say fear, would you also say they feel out of control, like they can't control their environment? Like you may get them sick, which is they can't control. So they feel fear. Is that correct, what you're saying?
Yeah. You need to be home. And if you are outside, it needs to be for only emergencies, and you need to have a mask on. So you need to do this and you need to do that, so I can feel comfortable.
There you go. So I can be in control.
Yeah.
So my anxiety can come down.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, it's real. It's real that fear comes when I don't know how to realize what is within my purview of control and what's not. And so it is. It's a really compassionate place that sounds like you go where you can say, okay, I get it. They feel out of control. They probably have high anxiety because of it. They feel fear. I know what that's like to feel fear. I know what it's like to be out of control. And I also know that I can't control something. So I'm going to, here's another word that I use a lot with my clients is I'm going to learn how to surrender something I can't control. Instead of attacking somebody, I'm going to practice this skill of surrendering, which means I'm going to take responsibility for what's mine, which is maybe I need to say something or maybe I need to do a particular thing. And then I have to let go of the outcome of whatever happens. That's surrender. And it's very, very difficult. So I'm hearing you have a compassionate stance towards that person that feels fear, which is lovely. And wow, if most of us could do that, it would be a very different COVID experience, wouldn't it? If we could have compassion for each other and say, I understand your fear. It makes total sense. This is a lousy experience we're all going through. And I don't want anybody to get sick either. And it's something that we can't control. And so I'm going to surrender what is not mine. Beautiful response. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah. So that question, so managing or addressing the added layer of complexity when managing mental health, in regards to the stigma related to how I choose self-care, to me, I hear in that if I'm trying the complexity sounds like control. The complexity sounds like I'm worried about what other people's perceptions are of me and what I'm going to do. And sounds like some fear around, maybe choosing to go see a therapist. And so part of me just thinking of my own situation. When I chose to start seeing a therapist a few years ago, I felt that I did not want to admit that I needed help at all for any reason. And I get that, especially in the industry that I'm in. I work with a lot of macho guys, and opening up and being vulnerable. Sometimes I'm met with awkward stares and silences, and people don't want to talk to me for a while. But almost all the time, it ends up being a strength. And people, like, once I choose to be open about what's going on, other people are also open. But the bottom line is, if I feel like I need help, I've got to get help, however it is. And so I think it's focusing on what really matters. And so that complexity is a lot of stuff that I can't control, and I can surrender and just say, hey, I need help, whatever it's going to take, whatever I feel a pull to go and do, I ought to give it a try, and just be open and choose to risk whatever it is I'm feeling to do. And own it. If you want to choose self-care by going outdoors, great. If you need to see a therapist, great. You will be able to find people that will get behind you, whatever you choose. That's just something that came to me when I was thinking of that question.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I'm hearing you talk about, really be willing to be emotionally vulnerable, emotionally honest, and take care of the needs that you have. So good for you. We have another question from the YouTube audience. When you start feeling out of control, or as though things are falling apart in your life, how do you cope? Are there routines you cling to? Are there specific habits that help you? What are some go-to tools that you use? Excellent question.
So I'll jump in.
Please.
Unfortunately, some of the habits and routines that I cling to are not healthy ones.
Well, then don't share those, Dallin.
Well, I'm going to. This is a moment of vulnerability.
Okay, I'm glad. Just don't do this, audience.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, one of the things that I wish I were better at, and I definitely noticed a significant difference in, is when I exercise, and especially when I fit that into the routine that I mentioned earlier. Some of the things that I tend to glom towards if I'm feeling anxious are things like eating food that's unhealthy for me, or grabbing an extra Diet Coke, those sorts of things. But for me, again, I notice a really big difference when I exercise and specifically do something that's a little bit more cardiovascular. And that probably is something that you can do while social distancing, going for a jog, getting outside. For me, I feel the best when it's earlier in the morning, and I'm not doing it on a treadmill or doing it, in the basement where I might tend to work out. If I can get outside and get some extra fresh air, that really seems to help, especially since we're all inside a whole lot more right now.
Absolutely. I'd absolutely concur with that. Just smelling, I can feel that fresh air coming into my lungs, going outside and walking around. Anybody else have a comment on that? What kind of tools do you use?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And I think this is probably going to be a theme. One of the tools that I use is when I feel like things are falling apart, I reach out and share what's going on. And I look for people, or, podcasts is a great thing, or books or whatever, some source of people speaking sense to me, truth to me, so that I can center. Because when I feel like things are falling apart, that is, well, first I want to validate that that's a horrible feeling. It is so vulnerable and uncomfortable. And I felt that before. And what I need there is validation around those feelings. And so I've got to go to people, to friends or whoever, who are willing to hear me. I think that above anything else, that has been something that's helped in my life more than anything. So.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. When you know that there's someone out in the world that you can go to that says, I get it. I understand. It makes sense. Of course you feel like that. When I have somebody do that for me, I just relax. Even when I'm in a horrific situation, I think, oh, I'm with my friend. She gets me. And even though there's chaos outside that door, figuratively or literally, I know for this moment, I can be with somebody who truly sees me / loves me. And it does a world of help, because then I can kind of let the anxiety go. And after I feel calm, I can look to this person and say, okay, talk to me. Scott talked about, the jumbly thoughts in his head. I call them distortions. I can get rid of those distortions, because this person will say, Jody, you're trying to control this and you can't control it. Like, you want that person to like you. They don't like you. For whatever reason, they don't like you. And there's no way to control that experience of them. And it doesn't mean anything about you. It just means that they have their rationale, and you can let it go. You got to surrender it. So I totally concur with that, Scott. Ruby.
Yeah, I love both of those ideas. I don't know, reaching out to people, that's something that I have learned to do in recent months. But my favorite thing to do is to take those mumbly, jumbly thoughts, those distortions in my head, and just write. And I used to do it on paper. I like to do it on my phone now, just because I always have it with me. So I'm not limited to, I need to get home, or I need to get up and move into another room. I can write all of it down. And then I will take those words and the writing and to prayer, and I'll just present it to the Lord and say, these are my thoughts. Help me to be able to see through this, and to see where the lies are and where the control is. And then, not all the time, but sometimes I'll get feedback, and then I can write that. And it's so amazing to go back and look at it later and to see the difference, the stark difference between all of those jumbled thoughts that don't seem to make sense, that I wrote almost feeling like a crazy person writing them, and then to read just how simple and concise and clear and peaceful some of the words that come after praying.
Thank you. Thank you. One of my strategies is I will do something similar. I will write down 2 columns, what I can control and what I cannot. So whatever the circumstance is, I'll make those two lists. And I just write down everything I can think of that's within my purview of control. And so when I think of control, I think of what I am responsible for, like behaviorally responsible for, what I'm emotionally responsible for, and then what I'm not, or what I can't. And when I put those things on those two lists, things become really clear for me. Now, a lot of times as I look at the list, the things that I can't control, I have been actively engaging in much of that. And that's why I feel so anxious, because I'm trying to stop this thing from happening the way that it is. And that's when I say, let go, take your hands off. It's not your business. It's not your business. I raised two children, they're adults now. And one of my kids will say to me like, Mom, your parenting is done. Basically saying, you're not in control of me any longer. And I will look at him and say, okay, thank you. Thank you. And it takes me maybe a day after that, because I'm like, you're doing it wrong. I have more life experience than you do, but I keep my mouth shut because I'm not in control over him any longer. He is. Alrighty, I have another question, and I'd like, if any of you would like to describe what this means, I'm going to give a definition as well, but I'd love to have you add your definition to this. I want to talk about vulnerability. I've used that word numerous times, and I want to use it also in conjunction with connection, because when you learn how to be vulnerable, you will have the outcome of connection. And when you are connected, you know you're in connection because you don't feel anxious. You have a feeling of peace, even though you realize stuff around you can't control. When you are centered and you're acknowledging your vulnerability, then you will not feel like you need to compulsively go out and try to control something. So vulnerability to me, and I want you each to give your own definition of what this is like for you, and also how vulnerability fits into your life. I think many of our listeners are very interested in how to move from this state of fear and anxiety and recognizing what they can and can't control into a place of peace, a place of acknowledging, that they need to surrender certain things, they need to let go of certain things, which is very difficult. And so if you could share how you've done that. So vulnerability for me is acknowledging that I am susceptible to everything that goes on in life. I'm susceptible to falling, to death, to stubbing my toe, to not getting enough rest and then feeling, shaky because my body can't manage it. I'm vulnerable to disappointments, to fear. And so I'd like you to share a little bit about how you experience vulnerability and then what your strategies are for managing it in your life.
So for me, I feel like when you say vulnerability, the thing that comes to my mind first is how willing am I to be transparent, or how much am I going to try and maintain some sort of facade of what I want people to think about me or how I want them to feel about me. So for me, it's being transparent and, again, whether it's with work colleagues, close friends, family, total strangers, being willing to admit, hey, these are the places where I feel like I'm struggling, or this is where I'm weak. These are the places where I'm trying to improve. These are the places where I am improving. These are places where I'm not. For me, that ability to be transparent is honestly, again, where I kind of feel like I have a little more control and a little more internal peace, because I'm just I'm allowing myself to be a little more forthright and a little more honest. And I've generally found that people appreciate that and are generally, again, willing to reciprocate that. If I'm willing to be vulnerable with them, they're willing to be vulnerable with me. And as a result, we kind of know, we're not dancing around one another's egos. We're not dancing around mistakes that we've made or that have remained unaddressed. It just creates a candid environment that I feel like it is more productive, because I'm spending fewer mental cycles worrying about my own, again, that own ego or my own facade, and protecting that or somebody else's ego or facade. And we can just spend our mental cycles on the things that tend to be more important, like work or play or etc. Oh, you're muted, Jody.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for that response. That was very thoughtful. Ruby, how about for you?
I keep getting this memory. It is the only way I can define it and feel like I've really got it clicking. So we went to studios, something studios, not Disney, the other one.
Universal?
Yes, Universal Studios, like several years ago. And I had one child who, it was miserable. Every time they would go to get on a roller coaster, it was crying. It was like holding tight. It was screaming. It was just a terrible, I wouldn't say she had a really great time. I would say she had a very disconnected experience. And then when she saw that, oh wait, no one got hurt in this experience. Okay, so we went back last summer and she remembered how much of a painful experience that was for her. And she says, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to totally let go. Look at this. And so when she went on the roller coaster, she was like laughing and raising her arms, and she was just enjoying the ride. And so for me, vulnerability is looking at a situation saying, like, this is the same roller coaster. I just get to choose how I'm going to experience this. I can clench my fists and I can cry, or I could actually like choose to enjoy it. And I think that I know that the world isn't a very trustworthy place. I wouldn't say that I trust the world. There's, I think, a lot of lies coming out of this COVID thing even. But I do trust life. And so I think there's a difference there. I do trust life to give to me what it is I need. And if it's a situation that's painful, I just throw my hands in the air and go, apparently it's time to get stronger. I didn't want to be stronger. I wanted to sit on the couch and kind of roll in a paycheck, and now I don't get to do that anymore. Like, so here we go. Let go.
So I'm hearing you say that you're learning, and maybe this started a while ago, but that you're learning how to pain and not try to control it. That's what I heard you say. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, that's got to be hard for many people who hear that. Like, what, you want me to accept pain? And there's a term I use often. I call it inevitable pain. And people say, well, Jody, what's that? And I'll say, well, inevitable pain is pain that you can't control. We've been talking about this whole hour of things that show up in our lives that we just cannot control. I call it inevitable. And when you step into an inevitable, painful experience, that is the most wise, from my vantage point, the most wise posture is to realize, okay, I'm in a situation I can't control. What do I have responsibility for in the situation? Do whatever I can do as far as being responsible, and then let go of the rest. And so I'm hearing you say you're getting lots of practice during this experience.
Yeah.
I think we all are.
I want to go back to the roller coaster.
Right. The predictability of life. And I love how you said, Ruby, that it's this invitation to grow and to become stronger, I believe you used, and to mature, and to realize, like, wow, I don't need to control this in order to feel calm. Like, I can let go and still feel calm. I wonder if you tried to teach your child that, like, listen, you can take your hands off the roller coaster and still feel calm. Like, maybe not calm because you're just gonna have adrenaline, but feel confident that you're gonna be okay. I remember riding those things and thinking, if I just hold on tight enough, I'll keep myself safe. It's like, and then letting go and saying, okay, if that thing comes off, I mean, whether I'm holding on, it's going to come off, and practicing living in that inevitable, painful experience, that out of control experience with your hands off of it, i.e. surrendering, and then practicing feeling calm in that. Yeah. That's the balance. Scott, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I really appreciate what's been said already. Dallin, I loved what you said your definition of vulnerability, I felt was spot on, and that was an awesome analogy, Ruby. I have a little story as well to go along with this that happened to me this week. I pulled out of my driveway a couple of days ago to go to work, and all of a sudden my truck just stopped moving. I couldn't go back. I was backing out and it wouldn't back out, and I tried to go forward, it wouldn't go forward. So I ended up towing it to a mechanic and found out that one of the bolts holding my tire, my wheel to the ball joint had just fallen out, and so the wheel had just slid off and the only bolt holding it was completely bent, and so my tire was just about to fall off completely. I drive an hour each way to work every day. And if that had happened when I was driving, driving on the freeway or whatever, that could have been really bad. And I just felt totally exposed. And so for me, being vulnerable, it's similar to me to feeling exposed and out of control. But when I choose to be vulnerable in a different way, to me, I feel like I'm sharing my humanity with somebody else. And typically it's connecting on another level with somebody and just experiencing just the similar experiences that we all feel and just being open about it. There's a lot that's been said already that I don't think I can really add to. But when I think of vulnerability, I think of being just feeling exposed and totally open and surrendering. And a lot of times, something that I've connected to over the years is, if there's something going on for me that I don't want to talk about, that means I need to talk about it. And so for me, being vulnerable is just biting the bullet and choosing to open up about the things that I'm so scared to talk about, that I think people are going to think I'm crazy or some kind of monster for having thoughts like that or feeling this way about certain things, and just leaning into it and letting go. And I've never regretted doing it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ruby, thank you.
Scott, what you said, and Dallin, what you said about being transparent, when it jogged a memory when Kevin and I were going through the process of losing this business that we started. I reached out to I have a text stream with several people on it who I felt like could support me or could validate me. And I just reached out. I said, Kevin and I are having a terrible time. Anyone want to talk about this? And I didn't get the response that I was really hoping for. A few people jumped on and said, well, business has never been greater for me. And another person jumped on and said, well, have you tried this? And then it just kind of turned into like a few people who really like come out on top with this were the ones talking. And I had a hard time being happy for them because I was reaching out for this other reason. And so I just recognized it for what it was and kept calling other people who I felt like could maybe be in a similar situation who could offer some support. And it took a few phone calls before I found some, but I would say if you're watching this and you reach out to someone and you feel crazy after reaching out to someone, you just probably reached out to someone who wasn't available. So don't get discouraged with that. You may reach out to several people before you find someone.
Yeah, really good points, really good points. So I keep hearing all of you continually say, share your humanity, share what feels out of control. And then maybe some people are saying, I don't have anybody to share it with. Like everybody I'm around feels out of control with me. If that is the case, you probably want to contact Dallin. Dallin's got a lot of therapists that you can start working with. So in the spirit of what we've been talking about, these characteristics of feeling out of control and anxiety and being willing to recognize what you can control and what you can't control. I mean, that's just a part of life. I tell people constantly, the one thing that's consistent is that you cannot control things. I mean, that is every day. And if you really think about it, from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you're in control of very little. The only thing you're in control of is your own perceptions, your own feelings, and your own behaviors. And everything else is just kind of coming towards you. And so instead of trying to control that stuff, which means I don't want pain in my life, it's being willing to acknowledge to myself and to my relationships that you're out of control. Me too. I'm out of control. Let's sit down over, a plate of pasta and talk about it. Wouldn't that just be wonderful if we could sit with each other and talk about not what we need to control, but what we can't control? Now, when I say that, I am not a sit back and eat potato chips and watch TV kind of person. I am a go-getter. I have been working my whole entire life and I am very active. And so when I tell people like surrender, they're like, well, Jody, does that just mean you just kind of give up? It's like, oh, no. Surrender just means that you're thoughtful and you're wise about what you are responsible for, what you're not, and do everything you can within your purview of being responsible. And then what is not yours, that's what you let go of. So I want to bring this back and ask you all a question about those of you who have employees. What has been the most effective way that you've been able to support your team or your employees during this time, understanding that they are feeling anxious, that they're trying to find a way to accept what's going on in this feeling of out of control? How are you doing that? Dan, let's start with you. It sounds like you've got quite a few employees.
We're still pretty small, candidly, but we have a lot of clinicians on our platform that are available for see virtually. But I think the thing that as far as being supportive is just that it's being willing to listen, and sometimes that for me has meant just listening as opposed to saying, okay, here's the things you told me that are wrong. Here's what I want you to go and fix them, and being a little too prescriptive. Just being willing to listen and let it end there, just kind of help absorb and help sponge some of that anxiety out maybe. And like, full disclosure, I'll say this a million times, I'm not a clinician, I'm not clinically trained, but I can be somebody who's open for a conversation. And then, hopefully. And then again, just reciprocating, being willing to, again, pull down that facade and express where I'm feeling anxious or where I'm feeling fear. And for a lot of people, I've found, myself included, that sometimes feels like it's the most validating, is just that ability to reciprocate and communicate empathy through action and vulnerability.
I totally concur with that. Being able to meet people like in their humanness. And a lot of people struggle. It's like, well, if I meet them and where they're at, then maybe they'll take advantage of me. And the truth is that when you really know how to connect with a person and you can say, like, I see you, I get it, then you can use this word. I always say, and you're responsible for this. Like, I get that you were up all night with a new baby and you have a project that you're responsible for. And so a lot of people don't know how to say that and word because they don't know about it. So it's a really nice little tool I invite you all to use, that you can validate and say, I see you, and then you can hold the person accountable inside business. But people need to be seen. Like, you've been staying here all, the last week working on this. I see you, and this is another project that needs to be put on your plate. Scott or Ruby, what has been the most effective way to support your team or your employees during this time? Scott, it sounds like you're a superintendent, is that right?
Yes, it is.
So how many people are answer to you?
Well, I manage the workflow of building homes. And so I interact with a couple assistants and subcontractors. And they open up as much as they want. And sometimes that means I don't have very much communication with them. But when it comes down to it, the biggest thing is a lot like what Dallin said, is to just be willing to listen and see them. And I think something Ruby said earlier too, is to just recognize their humanness and to have compassion for them. And a lot of times, people, they'll express their fears and anxiety and sometimes choose to go into a victim mentality and say, and because of this, then that's why I didn't get this done, or that's why I can't do this right now. And so for me, kind of like what you just said too, Jody, be willing to empathize with them and to validate what they're going through, and then just say, and I still need you to get this done. And when I'm available to, I will offer to help however I can. And again, that's showing empathy through action, like what Dallin, I think, was referring to. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
So for my clothing line, we had a team of 8, and I was just open and honest with them, and explained what was, going on, and told them I would do whatever it was that they're all not, what do you call them? They're contractors. So if there's something I could do to, post on your website, if you want to take, something of mine and post it as like an example on your website, I'd be happy for you to do that. And I would encourage you to be honest. There was one contractor that my designer out of London, I had hired her and signed a contract that I would buy 4 lines, 4 tech packs, 4 design kits from her for the year. And so I told her, since I had signed that contract with her, that I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but go ahead and finish up that work. And I may just have some tech packs. Maybe someone will want to buy someday, or maybe it'll just, it'll just sit. But she
Very out of control, very vulnerable.
well, and she just broke down in tears when I told her that, because she said that she has all of her clients sign a contract with her, and I'm the only one who kept the contract. And so I would encourage you to be very honest where you can be. And I mean, I know money's a limited commodity, but if you can be honest, and that would be great. With our other contracts, so our golden goose egg 8 passengers, we've signed contracts with, I'd hate to throw Coca-Cola under the bus or some of these bigger companies, but they've pulled contracts out from underneath us, and I know they've got the money, and it's just not honest. It's not honest.
Beautiful response. That takes a lot of what I would call character to stand in front of that figuratively and go, oh my goodness, I've put my name here and I don't know how I'm going to provide this, whether it's money or whether it's a product, but I'm going to trust that somehow I'll be able to do it, and I'll hold my word. Thank you. Thank you. That was really vulnerable. We have another question from the audience. Could you provide some suggestions on how to communicate with people in your life, could be family or coworker, that open up to you about fear and anxiety? How do you help them? Somebody comes to you and says, I don't know how to manage this. I'm out of control. I feel incredible fear, incredible anxiety. Guide me. I don't want to feel this anymore. What do I do?
So I'll chime in here. I mean, I probably have my 2 cents answer, which is probably just, again, listen and try not to be overly prescriptive. But Jody, of all of us here, you're the one that really probably knows this the very best. And I don't want to be out of turn, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this question personally.
Oh, thank you, Dallin. Well, this is something that's very familiar to me, and I teach people about that fear is a perception that they're having. That if you can stand back far enough, and if you're still in fear, you got to stand back far enough that whatever is presenting, it can be an opportunity for them to learn from it. Now, does it mean that they're not going to be in pain? Does it mean they're not going to get hurt? Does it mean that somebody, may not die or somebody may not get sick? No, all of those things are on the table because we entered this existence called life. We're vulnerable. And so I do a ton of validating. So I would invite this person to validate that person's fears and say, I get it, I hear you, it makes sense. And then I'd ask them, do you feel like I'm with you? And when they say yes, then you can say, and let's talk about a way for you to think about this so that you don't walk around in this state. And then I start teaching them about fear is this experience where I have perceived something in a way that says that thing is going to hurt me somehow. Financially, emotionally, somehow that thing's going to hurt me, or that person's going to hurt me. And so I need to be able to stand back at a distance and take the personalization away from that thing. That yes, that thing may affect me adversely. That thing may cause pain to my body for whatever reason. I was out hiking the other day and ran into a rattlesnake. Now, I've never run into a live rattlesnake. I climbed up on a rock, boom, it was there, like eye to eye with me. And I was like, inevitable pain, right? Fear, like crazy. Didn't get stung, just backed away. But I reminisced that thing for probably 3 days in a row, was in total fear throughout those 3 days. And I kept saying to myself, Jody, if you would have been struck, you would have been taken to the hospital. You were with somebody, they would have taken you. I went through the whole thing of what would have happened. I might have died, yes. But what it does is it allows me to pull back really far and depersonalize or take the personalization out of this experience. And when I do that, when I get out of the fear, the anxiety goes. Because when I have fear, anxiety comes. So those two are like Siamese twins. When I can move away from that fear and tell myself the truth, like, yes, I could have been bit. Yes, I could have died. Yes, like the truth about these experiences. When I do that, the fear leaves. I promise you, the fear leaves. And then people will say, well, I don't want to die. And it's like, well, I get it. I don't want you to die either. And that's a possibility. You have to be willing to accept that you are vulnerable in this world. So that's what I teach people. And it's been very, very, very helpful to many, many people, teaching them about how to manage themselves. Scott, how about for you?
Well, I had a thought to this, and that is, so I appreciate Dallin asking you, Jody, to explain that. And you've been doing this for years. You're a therapist. You know the answers. But listening to your podcasts and practicing, vulnerability and hearing people, and we're all here right now because of a pandemic. The reality is we're vulnerable all the time, pandemic or not. And so our vulnerability, all these mental health issues, they're with us 24/7, like regardless of what's going on. This just happens to be a common stressor for everybody right now that we're experiencing. And one of the questions is, how do you cope? Like, what are some of the routines that you have? I just want to put this out there that you don't need to be a therapist to be able to hear and validate and empathize with somebody and help them see truth. And so I think that part of something that I can learn and we can learn from this is how important it is to take care of myself mentally and emotionally, not just, physically, spiritually, and in other areas. But I can learn this stuff, and it's so important to learn. And, one of the questions is, how do you help someone? Like you listen, you validate. And if you don't know what to do, you say, I don't know what to do, but it sounds like this is really painful, and you can learn together. And so I just want to say, like part of this experience ought to teach us that this is a big deal, and everybody's experiencing this vulnerability and is always vulnerable. And this is something that is so important to take care of ourselves, and to learn how to manage this.
Absolutely. Thank you for normalizing it. Just kind of levels the field. You're right. We're always vulnerable. We're just having a global experience together around this pandemic. Any thoughts, Ruby?
I was just thinking, I love those answers. I don't have much to add to that. But I did have the thought that when someone comes to you, a coworker or a friend, a family member, and they're struggling, and especially if you can see that they do need help, it isn't your job to actually fix the situation. It's not your job to alleviate their pain, and it's not your job to come up with a solution. So keeping that in the forefront of your mind, you really can't mess up too badly if you are, because you're not, yeah, you don't have to be qualified. You just need to be a friend and to hear them and to say, yeah, you're definitely not crazy, or, you know, this makes sense, and you probably feel like you're going crazy. And so they're not going to get help first, I think, until they, I don't know. I think a lot of people, I'll just speak for myself. I didn't think I needed to get help until someone told me, hey, you know, talking to someone could be helpful. And it was like, oh, well, like I thought of that, but since you thought of it, okay, now it's okay to do. Like, and then the therapy comes in and I realized to think on my own. But at that point, they may not be thinking independently and being responsible for their own thoughts. So you can encourage them to, yeah, like you said, Jody, normalize going and getting help.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you. All right, excuse me, I have one more question. What do you wish you would have known 3 months ago that you now know about mental health resources? And how it would support you in your business, in your home life, in all of your relationships? What do you wish you would have known 3 months ago that you now know now?
So I don't know about 3 months ago, but 3 years ago.
Back when I was 5, I wish I would have known.
Exactly. I mean, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about my experience trying to meet with a therapist. It sounds like it was fairly similar to yours, Ruby, where I had somebody else that kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you are not acting like yourself. Maybe you should consider talking to a professional therapist." And I was really grateful to that person that they were willing to be, honestly, that vulnerable with me and put themselves and expose themselves for me, maybe being upset with them. That ended up, kind of sending me down a rabbit hole that led me to the company that I'm working with right now. But for me, the thing that I guess I wish I had realized is what therapy actually was. And when I say therapy, I mean in the context of talking to a professional clinician, and what it isn't. My assumption was that, talking to a therapist was I go sit on a couch for an hour each week, and I do that for 3 or 4 years, and eventually we uncover some unhappy truths about my childhood or something. I don't know. It was like a very cynical, like Freudian interpretation. Like, this is what I see in the movies. What I learned that therapists can really help is for me to basically talk through my own problems. They've helped me understand and help me learn new skills that help me recognize the things that cause me anxiety or make me feel the biological response that is depression. And then they've helped me learn skills to self-talk my way through those biological responses. And that's something that was kind of a night and day shift for me. Again, I really thought that therapy was something that was completely different from what it was. And after having this conversation with lots of people, that seems to be fairly common. So I think, if I could give a word of advice for somebody who's thinking about talking to a professional clinician or a coach, would be to take that leap. And the search can be a little bit fraught and challenging, but go and see what it feels like, and then see if it helps. And the other thing that I would advise is to be consistent about it for at least the first few weeks, and really make sure that you're keeping with the homework that they might give you, and that you're not going to just go once or twice, hit it and quit it style. Give it a few sessions and then reevaluate. Because I've found that has had a very significant impact on my own life and how I interpret and see the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Ruby or Scott, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. So for me, this is something that I've been learning for a while, but I just want to relate a couple of experiences I've had during this pandemic. And the first one is the rush on toilet paper. That was a really horrible time for me to run out of toilet paper, like to go to the store and not be able to get any. And so just the madness of trying to get that and to not jump in all that as well. And then when the earthquake happened up in Magna, then there was a rumor that there was going to be another imminent earthquake that was going to be 9.0 this time. And then there was a rush on gas. And again, I needed gas. I was out of gas. I'm like, oh, crud. Do I need to stop what I'm doing right now and go get gas? Because everyone's freaking out. And I chose to go get it. And there were lines and people were they were freaking out. Like there was a father with some kids at a gas station they were adult children with their cars, and they were running around screaming like, get the card, get the cash, whatever you got to use. We got to get all this gas and people filling up tanks of gas. And it was just really scary to see that and really sad to see that. And so something that I wish I learned a long time ago is that I do not have to engage the fear. I don't have to engage my anxiety. There's a way out. I can choose my perceptions. And that has been so powerful for me. Like that I have that choice. I didn't feel like I had that choice a few years ago, but I have it and it's so freeing. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is intense. I got anxiety just listening to that story. Oh, yeah. So that's intense. I think, so what I wish I would have known before, having gone through some experiences with therapy is that before I kind of thought, I've always thought of myself as spiritual, religious, faith-filled, and I thought that therapy was where you go when you're not faithful, and or you're not being, your connection to God's not good enough, so you have to go to a therapist. It was a very black and white. But I see now that that's not the case at all. That is not, there's no truth in that at all. And so that's one thing that I wish I probably would have known a lot earlier.
Wonderful. Sounds like there was a lot of fear in that too, just from what you described.
Yeah, if I go see a therapist, then that means I'm not a good disciple, or then that means I'm not a good mom, and that means I'm not trying hard enough.
Yep. Yes, and the list goes on and on and on, which boosts up your anxiety and your fear. Big, huge, vicious cycle.
And then I jump into control and try to make everything go just right. Oh, it doesn't work.
That's right. Fear and control, they always go together. You feel fear. Anxiety is just another, it's like a precursor to me going into control. Mm-hmm. So fear, anxiety, control, and it's just a cycle that we go into. It's like our listener asked the question, like, what do I tell someone? How can they stop that? And there is a way to stop that. You just have to understand where fear is coming from, what's creating it, your perceptions, and how to change those perceptions, even though there still may be pain associated with it. We as humans, we hate pain. Our bodies, our minds, it's like if there's any pain, we are fantastic avoiders of pain. None of us are willing to go into a situation knowing that there's discomfort in there. And when you start learning principles that will help you govern anxiety and fear, you actually learn to walk right into the circumstance where the pain is, the inevitable pain, not pain that is dangerous, but inevitable, stuff you can't control. So I just wanted to thank all of you, Ruby, Scott, Dallin, all of you have been really open and really raw, really vulnerable. Thank you so much. It's been a robust and a very thoughtful discussion. I have enjoyed it, every minute of it. And thank you, audience, for writing your questions down. Hopefully we've been able to answer them thoroughly for you. And I just want to remind you that the recorded version will be on slopeserves.com and also on YouTube on the Silicone Slopes page. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.